My family treated me like I didn't exist until I became trustee of the fund they were abusing. Hi, I'm Frederick, 29, and the night everything blew up started with my grandmother calling my sister's kids the future of this family, and ended with her discovering I'd quietly taken over the trust she'd been flaunting for a decade. She screamed. My dad dropped his fork. And my aunt said one sentence that froze the room colder than the cake in the freezer. But let me rewind to the moment I walked into that dining room. Picture this: ribbons on every chair like we were celebrating royalty, a cupcake tower taller than two of my cousins stacked, and a slideshow of Grandma through the decades curated by Aunt Bev, who treats family gatherings like film festivals. I was already at the kids' table, because my mother said the main table needed balance, which is code for someone has to sit near the outlet, and Frederick does podcasts. I do. Guilty. I run a mid-sized podcast about money and work. Apparently that makes half my family think I'm a walking ATM, and the other half think I'm a walking self-help hotline. I live alone in a one-bedroom with 2 tiny rescue cats and a foam-paneled wall I'm weirdly proud of. It's a modest life. Quiet. Which is probably why this whole mess exploded like it did. Because the golden ones arrived. My sister Leia strutted in 10 minutes late with her 2 kids wearing matching polos like a catalog ad. The room literally tilted toward them. Aunt Bev announced, "Make room for the future of this family." The sunflowers turned. The choir sang. The world revolved. Me? I got a nod. Then the first grenade dropped. Straight from tutoring, Leia said loudly, kissing Grandma's cheek. 2 hours of Latin. And don't even ask how much that camp cost. Of course someone asked. $8,500 for 4 weeks. She chirped. But worth it. They're on the college track. Everyone oohed like she just announced a cure for loneliness. Mom added, and thank heavens for the college fund. Your grandfather had such foresight. Our college fund. Leia corrected. The trust, remember? She said it like a punchline. Grandma laughed like she'd rehearsed it. I felt my jaw tighten. I checked my phone like I was reading important weather updates. I wasn't. I was just trying not to commit a felony with a butter knife. Because what none of them knew yet what I knew every time Grandma bragged about investing in the grandchildren, while looking directly over my head, was that the trust she'd paraded for years didn't belong to her anymore. And tonight, whether I wanted it or not, that truth was coming into the center of the room. Whether it burned us all down or not. I didn't mean to hijack Grandma's birthday. I really didn't. I'd planned to have the conversation after cake, maybe when she was still riding the sugar high. I'd rehearsed a calm version. Professional. Like a podcast intro, gentle but firm. But Leia kept poking the bear. And thank goodness for the trust, she said again, loudly, during the soup course. I mean, how else could we afford all this enrichment? You can't just wing your way into Yale. She sipped like she'd dropped a mic. Meanwhile, the room buzzed with admiration. Uncle Rob asked if they'd thought about Harvard too. My mom turned toward me with a smile like a butter knife. Frederick, maybe you'll feature your niece on your little show someday. A success story? I nodded like I wasn't biting the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste blood. See, when I was 12, Grandpa started the educational trust for his grandchildren. Back then, I was the only grandchild. The trust was this mythical thing mentioned when I asked for soccer cleats, or a TI-84. Asked your grandfather. My mom would sigh, and he'd laugh and talk about fiscal responsibility. We didn't use it. We displayed it. Like Grandma's crystal bowls. Then Leia had kids. And suddenly, grandchildren meant them. Exclusively. It was like I aged out of financial visibility. I paid for college myself. Still paying, actually interest and all. Worked night shifts, edited audio in dorm closets, built my show from nothing but bad plugins and tenacity. No one clapped. No one said, thank goodness for the trust. Because I didn't exist inside it anymore. Not really. So I read the clause. The one no one else bothered to. The one that said both named beneficiaries could appoint a new trustee in the event of mismanagement. The one that gave me power if I was brave enough to use it. And I did. 2 months ago, after years of listening to my family say I should be happy for the kids, I tracked every expense that didn't align with the purpose of the trust. Summer camps. Tutors. Private violin lessons billed as cognitive enhancement. And the final straw, a ski weekend Leia posted with the caption, #funded-and-fun. I gathered documents. Filed notice. Petitioned. And then quietly, formally, Legally, I took over. The trust is still there. Still for the grandchildren. But it's being used for what it was meant for: tuition, books, fees. Not yacht painting classes. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my dad. Until tonight. Until Grandma, wine glass lifted, made a toast. To family, she said. And to the grandchildren we invest in. I looked at my empty soup bowl and knew I was going to open my mouth. Grandma, I said. Just her name. But it sliced through the room like a sudden draft. Forks paused. Napkins froze mid-dab. Leia sighed audibly, like she'd just been told her espresso would take an extra minute. Sweetheart, Grandma replied, sing-song sweet. Let's not talk money at dinner. I smiled politely. It's already done. She blinked. Not fast. The way people do when they think they misheard something important. Done? She repeated. I pulled out my phone, swiped once, and turned the screen so only she could see. One email. From the bank. Subject line: Successor Trustee appointment finalized. She didn't react at first. Then she squinted. Read it again. And her smile cracked, just slightly. What is this? She asked. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I just said it clearly. The trust had a successor clause. It activates upon evidence of misuse. The bank agreed. The lawyer filed notice. It's effective as of last week. Grandma's eyes narrowed, and she stood so fast her chair screeched across the hardwood. You moved it into your name? She demanded. Into my trusteeship, I said evenly. Which is different. And allowed under the clause. The room exploded. Leia stood. You've got to be kidding me. You don't even have kids, Frederick. You wouldn't know what a child needs if one hit you in the face with a xylophone. My mom gasped like I'd set fire to the sofa. After everything we've done for you. Dad's fork hit the table. Ping. Fix this, he said, quiet but sharp. I kept both hands under the table so no one could see them shaking. The trust is intact, I said. Every penny. I'll approve tuition, books, fees. But enrichment? Summer camps? $8,500 retreats that teach them how to stand on paddle boards? That's a no. Aunt Bev, who once called a camp scholarship emotional ROI, actually whispered, Is this legal? And then cutting through the noise a single voice. Joy. And by marriage. Never loud. Always folding napkins when drama starts. She spoke softly but clearly. I asked for statements when I co-signed Leia's preschool deposit. Your mother said the trust wasn't public. That's when I realized you weren't tracking properly. She didn't yell. Didn't even look angry. Just calm. The entire table went still. Even the kids, who'd been sneak-watching cartoons under the table, paused. Grandma looked stunned. Joy, not helpful, Leia snapped. Helpful would have been following the rules, Joy replied, still folding her napkin like it owed her money. The room fractured. Some people gasped. One cousin got up to check on the ham. I just sat there and breathed. Because the turning point wasn't me becoming trustee. It was someone else finally asking the question I'd been screaming in silence for years. Why were the statements hidden? Grandma's voice came back jagged, all brittle edges and trembling vowels. I did what was best, she said, glaring at me like I'd just torn the lace from her birthday cake. For whom? I asked. Not sarcastic. Not angry. Just tired. She pointed a shaking finger across the table at me. You have always resented them. Them. My sister's kids. The actual grandchildren. I looked at the oldest one, who was staring into his lap like he wanted to dissolve into his mashed potatoes. He wasn't the problem. None of them were. But they were watching. Which meant this moment mattered. I sat up straighter. The trust, I said slowly, is not a piggy bank. It's not a participation trophy for parenthood. It's a legal agreement. I didn't write it. Grandpa did. I'm just the first person in this family who bothered to read it past the bullet points. Dad stood up, slow and stiff like he was gearing up for a full-on moral monologue. Give it back, he said. It's not yours to give, I said. It belongs to the grandchildren. I'm just making sure it's there when they're actually ready for college. Leia slammed her napkin on the table. You're stealing from my kids. No, I said. I'm protecting their future from your Pinterest budget dreams. The sound that came out of her was somewhere between a gasp and a snarl. You smug little. Trustee. I finished for her. She took a step toward me. And that's when Aunt Bev, yes, that Aunt Bev whispered, "You can't enforce this. You don't even have a family of your own." The silence that followed had mass weight. Like someone had dropped a piano made of shame onto the table. And that's when I said the thing I'd never planned to say. The sentence that shifted the tectonic plates of our family forever. "I'm not the one who turned love into a tax shelter." Gasps. Forks. The dog barked from the other room. And then Leia's kid, God bless him, looked up, dead serious, and said, "Wait, are we poor now?" I couldn't help it. I laughed. Then I stood up, left my untouched plate, and walked into the kitchen like it was a stage. I opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, came back and dropped it on the table. "This," I said, tapping the cover, "is the breakdown. Every trust expense for the last 6 years. I highlighted every camp, every enrichment program, every ski trip, every violin class labeled as developmental learning. I left the actual college payments in green. There are only 2 of those." No one spoke. Joy leaned in to read. Grandma sat down so hard her chair creaked. Mom just stared like I'd sprouted horns and a legal degree. "The trust isn't gone," I said. "It's just no longer your playground." I looked at Leia. Then Dad. Then Grandma. I'm done pretending mismanagement is generosity. The group chat lit up before I even made it home. "First, Leia, you humiliated us. The kids are crying. You ruined Grandma's birthday. Then, my mother, you heartless boy. Fix this or don't come around anymore. And my dad, classic, call me. Man to man. We'll sort it out." I didn't call. I emailed. My tone. Podcast host who edits his own rants into TED Talk clarity. I attached the trust document with the relevant sections highlighted. I included the lawyer's formal letter confirming the successor trustee change. I listed every educational expense Grandma had approved that fell outside of the trust's intended scope with links. Receipts. In closing, I wrote, "To prevent disruption to the kids' current semester, I'll personally cover their remaining tutoring sessions. Moving forward, the trust will only disperse funds that align with the document's original intent. No camps. No enrichment retreats. No ski schools named after birds." Leia replied 10 seconds later, "Keep your blood money." Aunt Joy messaged privately, "Proud of you. This is the first non-insane decision anyone in this family has made since the Bush administration." Grandma didn't text for 3 days. When she finally did, it was a voicemail that started with a sigh and spiraled into a 6-minute monologue on loyalty, betrayal, how some people confuse control with love. She used the word ungrateful 4 times. Also, show-off crusade. And, "You'll regret this when you have your own." I let it sit in my inbox like an antique grenade. Didn't play it again. Didn't respond. Instead, I paid a chunk of my student loans and recorded an episode called Boundary Budgets: How to Allocate Money and Attention When Your Family Treats You Like an ATM with Emotions. It went viral. Listeners sent DMs about cousins who used Grandma's medical fund for destination weddings, about brothers who bought jet skis with scholarship money, about uncles who promised tuition and delivered trauma. I cried twice while recording. Muted the mic, kept going. A week later, my dad called. "Son," he said in that overly warm tone that always precedes a guilt sandwich, "can we meet at the diner?" We met. He wore his cable-knit serious talk sweater. Ordered coffee he didn't drink. Leaned in close and said, "Your grandmother is upset. I noticed. She feels disrespected. I moved the trustee role according to the clause." He tried to chuckle. "Look, maybe we do a family agreement. You let your sister manage it again. You co-sign, if that makes you feel respected." The way he said respected made me want to eat a sugar packet just to feel something. "Dad," I said, "you want me to put the fox back in charge of the henhouse." He sighed. "Your grandmother's afraid of losing face. She lost track. Those are different things." "I don't recognize you lately," he said. I finally recognized myself. The waitress brought the check. I paid. That was the first time my dad didn't argue about splitting it. The holidays came beige and passive-aggressive. I wasn't uninvited. Just unmentioned. The family group thread still existed, but my name only came up in third-person tones. "Frederick's probably too busy. He has his podcast thing. We assumed he'd be traveling." I wasn't. I was home, wrapping up a client series, editing with my cats curled like headphones on either side of the keyboard. Peaceful. Unbothered. Until a letter from the university bursar dropped into my inbox. Leia's oldest, my niece, had been accepted early decision. Good for her. Genuinely. The letter was a notification for direct payment. As trustee, I was required to coordinate tuition disbursement. So I paid it. Directly to the school. No ceremony. No calls. No text to Leia asking for thanks. Just a screenshot of the cleared transaction sent to her, my parents, and my grandmother. Subject per trust. Leia responded with one word: fine. Which, in our family, was basically a peace treaty written in emotional Morse code. But Grandma? Oh, Grandma went nuclear. She asked her church prayer group to pray for her wayward grandson. Aunt Bev sent me a passive-aggressive meme about honoring your elders, a cat with folded paws under the caption "Respect isn't earned, it's remembered." My mom left a cake on my doorstep with family first piped in trembling pink icing. It melted slightly in the afternoon sun, making it look like a prop from a horror movie. I took a picture. Ate a corner. Threw the rest away. My therapist asked how I was sleeping. Better, I said. Because I was. Not blissfully. But unhooked. Like I'd finally stepped out of a role I never auditioned for. The next episode of my podcast was titled When Love Costs Too Much, The Myth of Family as Unpaid Debt. It opened with a simple truth. Setting a boundary doesn't make you hard. It makes you honest. We got more listener mail than ever before. Stories poured in like open wounds. Nieces forced to care for elders who never cared for them. Sons labeled selfish for refusing to refinance someone else's mortgage. One woman wrote, "I told my brother I'm not his bank anymore. I put it in writing." I slept through the night for the first time since 2019. I stared at that sentence longer than I'd ever stared at my own analytics. It felt like proof that doing the right thing doesn't look like a hero's arc. It looks like paperwork. Like someone yelling at a birthday party. Like refusing to finance another person's entitlement, and still making sure the kids can register for school. It looks like me. Holding the line. About a month after the fallout, I got a text from my cousin Nate. Now, Nate is quiet. Always has been. He hovers in family photos like he's trying not to be included, smiles like it costs money. I hadn't heard from him in years, outside of liking the occasional podcast post. His message said, "Hey, I heard what you did. Made me ask my parents about my 529. There isn't one. I'm not calling to dump on you. I'm calling because hearing you say no gave me permission to ask." I stared at the message for a long time. Then he followed up. "I opened an account today. Only $50 a month, but it's a start." We ended up talking for an hour. About compound interest. About budgeting. I sent him my spreadsheet template. He sent me a picture of his dog in a flannel hoodie. Best family conversation I'd had in years. Meanwhile, Leia tried again. She sent me a screenshot of an unpaid invoice from a violin academy. Enrichment balance, $1,800. With the caption, "Monster." I didn't reply. I added it to the folder. Then came the whisper call from Grandma. "If you insist on playing banker," she said, "at least visit." So I did. Her house smelled like lemon polish and denial. We sat in the floral living room that looked like it had been designed by someone trying to win a doily competition. She poured tea like it was an apology. But she didn't apologize. Instead, she looked me in the eye and said, "You hurt me." I didn't flinch. I said, "You embarrass me. Is that what you wanted? Revenge?" "No. I wanted fairness." She tapped the table like she was checking its sturdiness. "Fairness isn't the same as love." "I know," I said. "That's why I chose fairness. Love gets too easily confused in this family." She stared at me for a long time. Then she asked, "Do you think you're better than us?" "I think I'm allowed to be equal." Her lips pressed together like she'd tasted something sour. She changed the subject to hydrangeas. We talked about flowers for 10 minutes. When I left, she pressed a Tupperware container into my hands. I don't know what was inside. I still haven't opened it. But it felt like a truce made of butter and guilt. That visit didn't fix anything. But it marked something. A shift. Because when I drove away, I wasn't narrating a guilt spiral in my head. I was humming. Because here's what had started to change. I stopped treating peace as my job. I stopped auditioning for actual grandchild. I stopped calling fairness cruelty. And for the first time in my life, I was finally playing a role I chose. One that didn't end with me holding the check and swallowing the grudge. The day college tuition was due for Leia's oldest, I didn't hesitate. I logged into the trustee portal, paid the full semester balance directly to the university, and CC'd Leia, my parents, and Grandma on the receipt. No flourish. No emoji. No note. Just a line that read: per trust, tuition, spring semester, paid in full. Balance remaining, $62,374. 42. Leia wrote back fine. Which, again, in our family is code for, I won't thank you, but I won't escalate. For now. Grandma stayed volcanic. She updated her prayer group's request list to include a grandson poisoned by pride. Aunt Bev sent another meme, this one of a lioness with the caption, real families don't keep score. Meanwhile, my mom tried to bribe the olive branch with cake again. This time the frosting said let it go in shaky blue script. She left it on my porch in 80-degree weather. It slumped. Fittingly. I took a picture, then ate a corner just to say I tried. Then I threw it out. My therapist asked, "Do you feel guilty?" "No," I said. "But I feel uninvited." "Good," she said. "Now you're choosing who you belong to." I told that story, cake and all, on the next podcast episode. Called it When Guilt Melts on the Porch. The inbox flooded again. One woman wrote, "My brother took out a second mortgage to pay for his daughter's acting camp. Said it was a legacy investment. You made me realize I don't have to co-sign that kind of delusion." Another listener said, "I finally told my dad that my paycheck isn't the family bailout plan." I cried. Then I slept. The power of a quiet no? That was the theme. That a line in the sand can be an act of love, especially when you're the only one willing to hold it. I started sending monthly reports to the family. Clean, professional. Leia never responded. My parents called them cold. Grandma once mailed one back with a note, "Not everything needs a spreadsheet." I disagree. Because spreadsheets don't lie. Spreadsheets don't forget birthdays and then ask for favors. Spreadsheets show you who's been benefiting and who's been bailing. Spreadsheets are boundaries on paper. And sometimes, boundaries are the most loving thing you can give a family that only knows how to take. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I finally saw something shift. An envelope in my mailbox, handwritten. No return address, but I knew the handwriting immediately. My niece. The oldest one. College-bound. The one whose tuition I'd paid. Inside, a card with cartoon owls on it and a note that read, "Uncle Frederick. I know I'm not supposed to pick sides. But I saw the emails. And I know you didn't have to do anything. So thanks. I hope I get to be a person who makes good decisions too. Also, Latin is super hard." I sat on my floor for 10 minutes just holding the card. The cats sat beside me like tiny judgmental bodyguards. It wasn't an apology from Leia. But it was the first real acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, someone else in the family was watching and thinking. A week later, another surprise. A DM from my cousin's teenage daughter, 16 and allergic to punctuation. "The house is actually nice. Grandma seems less weird there. T-checks for fixing whatever went down." I laughed out loud. Then I replied, "You're welcome. Come visit, no booking necessary. Just pancakes." She responded with a thumbs up and a picture of her cat in sunglasses. That small moment felt huge. Like I had proof of life on the other side of the minefield. Because the adults? They were still spinning. Leia tried reframing the entire thing to her friends online. Posted a filtered photo of her kids in front of a school sign with the caption, "Grateful for family that believes in education." No mention of me. Or the trust. Or the tuition. Grandma launched a silent campaign at church. Told people I'd taken over the finances. In a tone that suggested I'd embezzled communion wine. Kyle, Leia's husband, apparently called a lawyer. Or said he did. He also sent me a Venmo request labeled emotional damages. I declined it. Twice. But their noise? It got quieter. Because they started realizing the trust wasn't moving. Not toward them. Not under their thumbs. It was boring now, solid, untouchable, and professionally managed by the sibling they'd called difficult for a decade. And in the absence of chaos, something new started to grow. My parents began saying small no's that used to be yes. "No, we can't drive across town to fix your cable." No, we won't be watching the kids this weekend. Yes, they said one Sunday. To a nap on the porch. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. But it was a recalibration. A slow, beautiful rebalancing of a scale that had been tilted since I was 12 years old, and Grandma said, "We invest in the ones who matter." Now, I was showing them what it looked like to matter without begging for it. By late spring, the trust was no longer a family battleground, it was just functional. Boring, responsible, quiet. Like it should have been all along. The kids were enrolled. Tuition was handled. I sent quarterly summaries to the beneficiaries, no commentary, no guilt-trip footnotes. Just facts. Balance sheets. Eligible disbursements. Upcoming deadlines. Grandma stopped responding altogether. I'd send a document. She'd send back silence. Occasionally a handwritten note would arrive in the mail, always sealed in flowered envelopes, always signed. Love regardless. It felt more like a dare than a sentiment. Leah, on the other hand, tried a new tactic, rewriting history. She started dropping comments at family events, subtle digs shaped like nostalgia. Remember when we all used to vacation together? Remember when we didn't need spreadsheets to be a family? One Sunday after church, she told my mom, within earshot. I just miss when things felt simpler. Mom nodded and added, before lawyers got involved. I smiled politely and passed the salad. But the thing was, it was simpler now. Because there were rules. And rules, when followed, are incredibly freeing. Aunt Joy told me that at brunch. She leaned in, over poached eggs in silence, and said, I always thought keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. Turns out, peace shows up when someone finally says enough. And she meant me. It was weird being thanked by the quiet aunt, the overlooked niece, the cousin who never made eye contact at holidays. People who weren't loud. Who didn't throw tantrums or post passive-aggressive memes. They started orbiting closer. Demanding, calling, opening up. Turns out, I wasn't the villain in the family narrative. I was just the only one who had read the terms and decided to enforce them. The more distance I got from the drama, the clearer it became. I hadn't taken control of the trust. I'd accepted the responsibility everyone else pretended didn't exist until it could be weaponized. And responsibility, once you stop resenting it, is just another form of respect. For yourself. For the future. Even for the people who don't thank you for it. It was a random Thursday when the final piece fell into place, not dramatically, not with shouting, but with an envelope. I'd been at my desk editing an episode about financial estrangement, how families collapse under the weight of expectation and unspoken debt, when a letter from the university arrived. Not email. Not a PDF. A real, tangible envelope, addressed in careful handwriting. Inside, a thank you card. From my niece. Again. But this time, it wasn't cartoon owls or teenage sarcasm. It was simple, elegant, black ink on cream cardstock. Uncle Frederick. Thank you for giving me a future without guilt attached. I know this trust wasn't meant to be a fight. I'm sorry it became one. I want you to know I see what you did, and I'll never forget who made college possible. There was a second sheet of paper. A copy of her freshman course schedule. She'd circled, Intro to Ethics. And written beside it, I thought you'd appreciate the irony. I actually laughed. Full chest. No bitterness. I stared at that card like it was a passport stamp to a better future. Not because it changed anything, but because it meant that maybe, just maybe, someone in the next generation wouldn't inherit the family tradition of financial gaslighting. Because that's what this was, under all the drama and frosting-covered guilt. Generational financial gaslighting. When money's used as both leash and weapon. When love is conditional on silence. When boundaries are mistaken for betrayal. And the only way to stop it? You tell the truth. And you keep telling it. Even when your voice shakes. Even when your grandma tells people at church you've been possessed by spreadsheets. Even when your sister sends Venmo requests labeled compensation for cruelty. You hold the line. Because sometimes the most radical love you can offer a child, yours or someone else's, is a well-guarded fund and a clear definition of no. Summer crept in, and with it came the family reunion, a smaller one this year, hosted at a park instead of the usual rented hall. Less money, less grandeur, less drama. At least, that was the theory. I arrived late on purpose. Parked 2 blocks away. Wore sunglasses and my quietest sneakers. Not to sneak in, but to create just enough emotional distance between me and the lawn games. I brought deviled eggs. Because I'm 29 and apparently that's who I am now, a man who travels with Tupperware and boundaries. When I walked up, I saw Leia immediately. She was near the picnic tables, laughing too loudly, in a sundress that was probably a peace offering disguised as Target chic. Kyle wasn't there. Or if he was wisely keeping a low profile behind the coolers. Grandma sat in the shade wearing a wide-brimmed hat and the stiff posture of someone preparing to be disappointed. I nodded at her. She nodded back. Neutral. Muted. An unspoken agreement to avoid fireworks. Then I heard it. Frederick! It was my niece again, full speed toward me in sandals and pure enthusiasm. She hugged me like it was normal. Like we weren't living in the shadow of a family civil war. And in that second, everything shifted again. Not dramatically. Not cinematically. Just simply. The kid I'd fought for without her knowing? She knew now. And she wasn't embarrassed or conflicted or carrying her mother's grudge. She was grateful. We sat on the grass, paper plates on our knees, and talked about her dorm. Her roommate. Whether she should drop quantitative reasoning before it crushed her GPA. Later, as the sun dipped and someone brought out a Bluetooth speaker, and Joy joined us. She sat cross-legged in her capris and asked me if I'd ever thought about writing a book. About money and families, she said. I'd read the hell out of that. I told her maybe. Someday. What I didn't say was this: I already was writing it. In my actions. In the refusal to let history repeat itself. In every tuition payment with no applause. In every unanswered bait text. In every spreadsheet sent without spite. And in moments like this one warm, quiet, full of potato salad and soft reconciliation. Love didn't look like cake anymore. It looked like showing up. With limits. It was near the end of the reunion when the second surprise of the day unfolded. I was helping pack up folding chairs because of course I was the responsible one, even with a law degree's worth of trust documents in my backpack, when I saw Leia standing by the trees, arms crossed, watching me. She didn't wave. She just waited until I was close enough, then said, "They call you the enforcer now." I blinked. They? You know. Everyone. Her tone was flat, like she was trying to sound unaffected, but her fingers were worrying the hem of her dress like it owed her rent. I shrugged. I've been called worse. She looked down. I was gonna fight harder. At first. Lawyer up. Dig in. But then I read the actual documents. The stuff you sent. And I realized. She trailed off. Didn't finish the sentence. I waited. Let the silence breathe. Then she looked up and said, "You were right. About the misuse. About all of it." It hit me sideways. Not like a tearjerker movie climax. Like stepping into a room and realizing the noise has stopped. "You don't have to say that," I said. "I'm not saying it for you," she replied. "I'm saying it because one of my kids told me you're the only adult who's ever followed through. And I didn't want them to think I didn't notice that." I nodded. Slowly. Letting it settle. Then she added, "Don't expect a group hug or a trust fund truce. But I'm trying." I almost laughed. "That's all I've ever asked anyone in this family to do." She looked away and muttered, "I hate that you make boundaries look noble." I grinned. "That's because I keep spreadsheets." We stood there a second longer. Not friends. Not enemies. Something new. Something raw and in progress. She walked away before it could get too sentimental. I let her go. No performance. No finale. Just two siblings circling a détente shaped like mutual exhaustion and overdue honesty. That night I got a text from my dad. "Your grandmother mentioned the trust today." She didn't yell. Small miracles. The next day, I transferred funds for fall semester. No comments. No fanfare. Just the clean rhythm of the trust working as intended. I'd stopped asking for recognition. Now I was just protecting what mattered. Fall came in soft, cooler mornings, quieter inboxes, and the kind of routine that makes you wonder how chaos ever felt normal. I settled into my Tuesday recording schedule. Woke up early. Fed the cats. Ground the coffee like it was a ritual to remind myself, I get to have peace now. Not because it was gifted. Because I fought for it. The episode that week was called Legacy and Limits, When Tradition Becomes a Transaction. I told a story. Not mine, someone else's. A listener who wrote in about discovering their grandparents had emptied their college fund to remodel a kitchen. For resale value. They'd found out in July. School started in August. She wrote, I wasn't mad they used the money. I was mad no one told me the rules had changed. That hit. I said on the episode. What makes financial betrayal so brutal isn't just the money. It's the rewriting of reality. The quiet decisions that turn promises into ghosts. The response was huge. Comments. DMs. Even a voicemail from a financial advisor who said, "Your podcast is the only place my clients hear the truth without shame." And then, a message from my niece again. Started my work-study job. It's boring but kinda satisfying? I think I get you now. You like doing the work no one else wants. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at that sentence. She got it. That's all I'd ever wanted. Not a throne. Not a parade. Just understanding. I forwarded her the coursebook PDF she couldn't find online. Sent her a link to a free budgeting tool. Didn't sign my name. 2 days later, she posted a picture of her dorm desk, laptop, coffee mug, notebook. Caption, starting to feel like mine. No tag. No shout-out. No performative thank you. But I knew. And that was enough. The family group chat? Still fragile. Grandma occasionally shared devotional quotes that could double as warnings. Leia posted pics of the kids in Halloween costumes with captions like "so lucky to have a strong family foundation," as if we all forgot about the $8,500 summer camp billed as cognitive enrichment. But the difference now? I didn't flinch. I didn't engage. Because I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was documenting. Protecting. Planning ahead. I'd stopped waiting for them to call me good. Now I was just making sure they called me fair. Thanksgiving came with a group email. Dinner will be at Aunt Bev's. Casual. No politics. Bring something to share. No politics. As if money wasn't the biggest campaign in this family. I almost skipped. I'd made peace with absence. But then my niece sent me a screenshot of the pie sign-up sheet with my name penciled in. Frederick Pecan, obviously. So I went. With 2 pies. Because I'm a sucker. And a trustee. The house was buzzing with old tensions reheated under cinnamon. Leia smiled a little too wide. Grandma was back to calling me our thoughtful one. Which in grandma speak is halfway between praise and threat. No one mentioned the trust directly. But it hovered. Like a fourth wall no one dared break. Until dinner. Halfway through Aunt Bev's annual monologue about gratitude and doing what we can for the next generation, someone clinked a glass. It was my niece. She stood, cheeks flushed, clearly nervous. "I just want to say thanks," she began. "For the trust. Not just the money. The, actual trust. Like being trusted to use it right." The table went quiet. You could hear the cranberry sauce sweating. "And to Uncle Frederick," she added, turning toward me, "for not letting people ruin it. Even when it got messy." Leia stiffened. Kyle looked like he bit a lemon under the table. Grandma's fork paused midair. "And me?" I didn't say anything. I just nodded. One hand under the table, steadying my knee. Because that moment? That was it. Not a public redemption arc. Not a tear-soaked group hug. Just acknowledgement. Earned. Undeniable. After dinner, Leia caught me alone by the fridge, where we both reached for the same leftover container. She said, "They really think you're a hero now." I shrugged. "I'm just a guy with a folder." She smirked. "You should write a book." I smirked back. "I kind of am." She didn't reply. But she let go of the container first. That night, I walked home in the cold with pie crumbs in my bag and the kind of silence that feels like armor, not exile. When I got home, I opened my laptop and labeled a new folder. Legacy. Inside it, I dropped the latest spreadsheet, the updated disbursement letter, and a note to myself. If you ever forget why you did this, read the thank you from the kid. Not the threats from the adults. I poured a coffee, sat in the quiet, and smiled. The storm had passed. But the house I'd built rules, limits, receipts it still stood. The email came just after midnight. Subject line. Clarification request regarding spring disbursement. It was from Leia. Not a rant. Not a threat. Not even a guilt trip. It was professional. She'd attached the course catalog, her kids' spring schedule, and a tight list of estimated expenses, tuition, books, lab fees, and a highlighted note beside a $200 item. Requested exception, Intro to Environmental Field Studies includes one-day retreat. I read it twice. Then again. She was following the process. For the first time in trust history, Leia was playing by the rules. No assumption. No drama. No passive-aggressive PS about being the only one doing the parenting. Just the facts. I approved everything but the retreat. Sent back a note. Trust only covers educational expenses that fall within the academic scope outlined in the clause. The retreat is categorized as enrichment. I'll cover tuition, books, and fees directly to the institution as usual. She replied within an hour. One word, understood. No fight. No fireworks. Just an adult interaction. I sat there, blinking at my screen like it was a mirage. Not because I needed Leia's approval, but because I'd finally earned something better. Her respect for the process. Later that week, I mailed the university check. Same routine. Same folder. Same trustee stamp. Then I did something new. I called my niece. She picked up on the second ring. Hey! Is this about the retreat? Mom said you said no? It is, I said. But not to scold you. To say thank you? For what? For going through the process. For treating the trust like a future, not a favor. She was quiet. Then, it feels safer this way. Like it's real. It is, I said. And it'll be there when you need it. Because we stopped pretending rules were optional. There was a pause. Then, you know, I thought you were just being petty. At first. I laughed. That makes two of us. But now I think you're just solid. Solid. Not brilliant. Not generous. Not fun. Solid. Honestly? That was the highest compliment I'd ever gotten from this family. That weekend, Grandma left me a voicemail. Short. No sighs. No shame spiral. Just, if you're free next Sunday, I made carrot cake. No agenda. Just cake. I didn't respond right away. But I saved the message. And for the first time in years, it didn't sound like bait. It sounded like an invitation. I showed up the next Sunday with decaf coffee and no expectations. Grandma met me at the door in her housecoat, hair pinned like she still cared about first impressions. The kitchen smelled like brown sugar and apology. She didn't try to hug me. She just said, I didn't frost it yet. Didn't want it to melt again. We sat at the table, 2 plates between us, a slice each. It was quiet. Not awkward, just quiet like an old book no one's rushed to finish. I thought you'd ruin everything, she said finally. I thought you wanted revenge. I took a bite. Chewed slowly. Swallowed. I wanted respect, I said. And rules. She looked down at her tea. No one likes the person who brings rules to the family table. I'm okay with that, I said. Someone has to set the table before people pile on the food. She snorted, actually snorted, and muttered. You always were a strange one. Then, but you were right. It didn't come out dramatic. No crescendo. Just that. Quiet and overdue. I wanted to be the matriarch who gave everything, she said. But I lost track. Of what was fair. Of what was mine to give. I didn't offer absolution. I just nodded. I don't expect hugs, she added. Good, I said, smiling. I'm not really a hugger. We sat there until the cake was gone. As I left, she pressed something into my hand. Not money. Not keys. Just a folded paper napkin with a sentence written in shaky pen. Thank you for guarding the line I kept pretending wasn't there. At home, I tucked the napkin into the same folder where I keep the thank you notes, the payment receipts, and the line I signed as trustee. I don't need to be loved for it. I just need it to last. Because one day, when the next kid applies for college, and the trust covers tuition quietly, properly, completely, someone will ask, who kept this going? And someone else will say, my uncle. He just did the job. Every time. That's all I ever wanted. And I kept the line.